Hey, my pleasure.
Your book is Where Have All, I don't even know what, I'm holding it up to here, I'll just hold it up over here. Where Have All the Democrats Gone? This was kind of an expose, I think, on your recipe for how Democrats lost their coalition. Written when?
We put it out last year, basically, exactly a year from.
Ruy, let me
before
ask
this
you a
election.
question.
Yeah.
Did you send it to any of the Democrats?
Not really, no. We hoped they'd pick up on it, I guess. Didn't happen, you know.
People aren't really readers anymore. Is there an audiobook?
There is an audiobook. Maybe we should have sent that to them. Or maybe like a 5-slide PowerPoint deck. And then
Now you're learning the game.
Right.
First of all, it is a really interesting historical breakdown context of sort of how the Democrats lost their more populist economic instincts. And can you go through it? Sort of the Clintons probably began it in a way, but even as far back as Jimmy Carter.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, Jimmy Carter had a sort of deregulatory, sort of anti-populist approach toward economics. He took on a lot of things that eventually found their way into the Reagan approach in terms of deregulation and so on. And of course, with Bill Clinton, we have, deregulation of finance. We have NAFTA. Eventually, after Clinton leaves, but, sort of he was pushing it along, we have the accession of China to the WTO, and you have the so-called China shock, which really destroys millions of manufacturing jobs. So over time, you saw a lot of working class people developing a sense, particularly in the areas of the country that have been left behind, that were dependent on industrial growth, on, resource extraction. I mean, they felt like Democrats didn't have their backs anymore. They felt Democrats were, this was a new world. We were all going to get educated. We were going to have a lot of economic growth because we're moving into the new information economy.
Right.
And forget that old manufacturing stuff.
And there wasn't seemingly much difference, other than maybe tax cuts and tax hikes, between neoliberal Democrats and standard Republican free trade policy.
Yeah, no, that was definitely true. I mean, that was very noticeable at the time, and there's some Democrats who pushed back against it, but they definitely lost the debate, and the Democrats became, there's sort of this third way thing in the 90s with Clinton and Blair and people like that, and sort of they basically put their chits down, and we have to get government off people's backs. We have to, deregulate. We have to just let it rip, right, with global trade. And eventually, it would all trickle down to the masses of honest workers and peasants of America.
It's coming, people. It's going to trickle down.
Yeah.
A few more decades. So then it's sort of, you get the rise of kind of Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren. There is this, and throughout it, Paul Wellstone, a progressive wing that wanted a more populist approach, but they could never win the day. And you make the case it's because the money that was coming into the Democratic Party was coming now from business and not from labor.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the influence of labor on the Democratic Party just declined so much in the 80s and 90s, of course, through our current day. I mean, it used to be labor was the backbone of the Democratic Party. That's what they relied upon for troops, for money to some extent. And that really just becomes completely replaced in the 80s and 90s. And even the culture of the Democratic Party changes because there used to be much more contact between the Democrats and the labor movement. There's a really close working relationship between them. Over time, the labor movement gets pushed out because it's also declining at the time. So it's
that's what I was going to say. What do you think came first? The decline of the labor movement, the decline of people participating in the labor movement, or the Democrats moving away from that as a source of...
Well, I think they were sort of an interactive negative feedback loop, as it were. I mean, fewer people in unions. It's kind of a death spiral if you want to be melodramatic about it.
Ruy, I do want to be melodramatic about it.
Well,
I don't know if you watched the first act, but I punched my hand through a donut hole.
Let's face it.
I mean,
that last election, things could have gone better.
I think... Now, and I'll say something that I feel like resonated with the audience and has resonated with them in a while. My idea of what happened with the Democratic Party is it was a rejection of a status quo, a feeling that not just in the working class movement, but in many movements, that democracy is by nature analog. We are living in a digital world where, terminally online, the outrage and the anger and the confusion is much elevated. And the distance between those 2 points becomes untenable, especially if the Democrats insist on, well, we have to keep I'd love to get you the help you need, but the parliamentarian is really been up my ass like all night.
Right.
I feel like that's a real problem for them.
Yeah, I mean, the sense that the Democratic Party isn't responsive to the needs of sort of the common man and woman, the working class, and they're too caught up in other issues, or they're too worried about, sort of government regulations and parliamentarian stuff. And they're not like laser focused on getting stuff done. And, even in places like New York City where you have, very democratic governance, there's a sense that they aren't pulling out all the stops to make sure everyone gets good services and everything runs well. And, effective government is what people want.
It's a triage system in some respects. There's two things. You have to respond to what seems to be the immediate needs and then lay the groundwork for the future. I still think they did an effective job laying the groundwork for the future.
The first part is what...
That's exactly right. Infrastructure bill, chips bill, those are great things. But the New Deal worked because it triaged the urgency.
That's right.
It seems like they had a problem. By the way, I don't think the Republicans do that either.
No.
In terms of that.
We'll see. I mean, look at these great cabinet picks that Trump has. They're ready. They're tan-rested and ready, to help the people.
I was warned about you. Ruy Teixeira is a dry son of a bitch.
Yeah, right. Well,
No, dead on right. I almost think, and this is a broader conversation, but if you look at sort of European countries, their satisfaction with government is higher because it feels like they think the money they pay into government returns in services they actually use. Mm-hmm. If you break down people's tax bill, the first probably 5 tranches of it are nothing that you use. 75, 80% of it it's military, Medicare, Social Security. It's stuff you'll use when you're 65 or 70, but you don't use now. How do we get them more responsive to what really is happening in people's lives?
Well, if I knew that, I would be running the Democratic Party and they'd be running the table. But first of all, I mean, you can't hit the target unless you're aiming at it, contrary to the Zen precept. You actually have to focus relentlessly on delivering for people in their daily lives and figuring out a way to do it. Okay, they've got X% of the budget that's, allocated to these other things, but how can we take what degrees of freedom we have and use them to help ordinary people so they feel it?
Right.
Let's not just pass a bunch of legislation that kind of sounds good and may pay off in the long run, but people don't really feel in their day-to-day lives.
And I think they have a sense that they work hard, they pay money into the system, and then that money is, whether this is hyperbolic or not, I think it is, goes to people who don't deserve it. It goes to migrants. It goes to trans people. It goes to this. And they don't deserve it. I deserve it.
Right. Well, the migrants thing became such a problem, obviously, because of, the extent to which immigration spiked, and then you had people turning up in overburdened urban areas. And, you even had a lot of black voters, for example, in Chicago saying, well, why should I vote for Kamala Harris? I mean, they're giving away all this stuff to people, who just came in from out of the country. They're not even legal. And,
but even
what about me?
Even that tells you, though, they had an opportunity to do something 3 years about it. They said they couldn't.
Yeah, that was baloney.
But I can't do it. I'm going to wait for it. First of all, that's the type of language that I absolutely...
Wait a minute. I saw your monologue.
That was... I don't know what happened there. It will get bleeped.
Okay.
But it is the kind of thing, like, we can't overturn norms and things. And you're like, well, how did you get to Kamala Harris as the nominee? That wasn't the norm.
Norms.
You overturned it. And by the way, when you did, there was an explosion of enthusiasm and excitement because they suddenly felt like, oh, they're recognizing a reality that I also see.
And now we have a chance.
And now we have a chance.
Yeah.
Why isn't that more a part of the governance?
Well, I think for example, look at the immigration issue.
Right.
Yes, there were some tenuous excuses why they couldn't move on it earlier, but why didn't they move on it earlier? It was a lot because the Democratic coalition is so responsive, Biden was responsive to the various elements of the coalition. He didn't want them to do anything, right? I mean, there were a lot of advocacy groups, a lot of parts of the Democratic Party that really thought things were fine. This is like not really a problem. It's all made up. It's all on Fox News. And Biden didn't want to cross them. I mean, and this is a part of the problem with the Democratic coalition today is too many parts of the coalition have veto power on doing effective things.
You get into something interesting with that, and it's something that I, rightfully I think have a blind spot on, and that is this idea of woke and DEI, and that the Democrats are too woke and too DEI, and that's why they lost. And it's hard for me to wrap my head around that.
Well, it's not the only reason, but it was a contributing factor.
Right.
I mean, if you look at, there's been some data collected after the election by the Blueprint Strategy Group that saw the top three reasons. You know them?
I love their listicles.
The listicle. Well, in this listicle, the first reason was inflation. The second reason was too much illegal immigration. And the third reason was Democrats being too concerned about cultural issues and not the welfare of the middle class.
Right.
I mean, and there's similar data from other places. I mean,
here's where maybe you can help me with this, but the idea of DEI, and maybe I'm just working off of the wrong definition of woke, which is, and maybe that's the thing that I don't understand, but like when they say all this DEI, it feels like you're talking about like that one seminar you have to sit in, like that's like an hour. Like I know it's a little,
more
like
to
it gets eye-rolly, but like it's a hour.
Right. Well, there's more to it than that. I think people have the perception that it's being used as a way of allocating things that's different from merit, and that's a real problem. I'm just saying, it doesn't seem to work that well. People don't like it, including non-white working class people. So, that's, I mean, there's a very reasonable argument that we need to lift up people who've been left behind by various vexed heritages of our country.
But I don't even know why that's controversial.
That's not controversial.
And why it's not.
That's not controversial. People are fine with helping out people who are disadvantaged. I mean, people are good with that. I mean, they don't think necessarily.
But see, here's where I'm lost.
Right. Okay.
Because you just said people don't like that. So I guess is it because of my definition?
People don't like DEI or reparations or whatever. I mean, whatever kind of a basket of things that sound to them like they're going to give people stuff that they didn't, sort of earn in terms of their
what is
merit.
it we're doing? Tariffs are there to repair the damage. Yes. I mean, I'll use the exact word.
Tariffs are an economic policy that's supposed to make it, sort of more things made in America. It's supposed to help manufacturing workers.
Yes.
And so on.
Okay.
So
wouldn't that suggest that
people look at class different from race? What can I tell you? It's just a fact.
But it's all mixed together, isn't it?
Of course it's all mixed together.
So why are you yelling at me?
Because you seem to be determined to, I don't know, what's your point? Is like race is more important than class?
No.
What's your point?
No, my point is it seems that government's job is to look at the systems that we use in this country to create wealth and progress.
Sure.
And then to look at the natural areas where those systems create collateral damage and repair as best they can the collateral damage of those systems. And I don't understand why we've singled out DEI as the devil and helping manufacturing as smart and good. Like, isn't it all the same thing?
The point about DEI is it's not particularly effective in lifting up.
But that's a different argument, is it not?
No, it's not a different argument. Basically, what I'm saying is that if you want to actually help people in a material sense, you want universal,
right now.
You want universal policies that will disproportionately lift up, say, Black and Latino poor people because they're more heavily concentrated among people who are
also because
that is what is popular.
But they were explicitly disadvantaged. So why wouldn't we try to repair that? But my point is, government picks winners and losers all the time. We have subsidies for farming areas, and those aren't controversial because they say the policies that we have in place have hurt farmers. So let's get some subsidies in there to ameliorate the damage. That is a particular
group.
group.
If you want to help out people who live in, say, poor Black areas or poor Latino areas, you can't just channel that money to people who are Latino and Black because that's unconstitutional and it's extremely unpopular. If you want to lift them up, have universal programs that actually help people who live in those disadvantaged. Everybody's for that. Everybody's for that. That's not DEI. DEI is really different. They're completely different.
I think that I disagree with you that everybody's for it because I think they view that as woke. that what I just described, they would view as woke, and that is of a different...
That's right. I think that's right.
All right. I get the sense that in this country, people look at entrenched poverty in the cities and think that it is a product of culture and vice. And they look at entrenched poverty in whiter areas and think that they are victims of economic policies that they are not in control of. I do think in this country it's viewed differently. I just think it, you know, here's what you didn't get. Here's what you didn't get during the crack crisis. Deaths of despair, these poor people. But in the fentanyl crisis, rightfully so, you do. And I think some of that has to do with the populations. And so that's my point is, why is DEI? I feel like then it's a failure to describe what we're trying to do.
Okay, well, DEI isn't the name for what you want then. It's something
because
else.
DEI is the only thing that will be allowed.
You know,
the
left
real
behind
things,
Black and Latino
But the
areas.
real
That's
things
fine.
that would help
Everybody's for
entrenched poverty in those cities aren't done in favor of, okay, we're not actually going to do that, but we will let you have an hour every 3 months where you get to tell us.
I agree with that. I agree with that. I think DEI is a very poor substitute for those kinds of programs.
Could you just look into that camera and say that? Do you think it is something that can be fixed? Is it perception or is it reality?
It is a matter of the kinds of programs will have to be promulgated on a universal basis, which have a disproportionate effect on Black and Latino working class and poor people. That's how you do it, and it's possible to build support for those, I really believe.
Right.
Don't call it DEI. Don't call it reparations. Don't call it anything like that, because those are really unpopular. Call it you're just trying to help people who are disadvantaged, and there may be complex historical reasons for it, and there's Black people and white people and Latino people who all need that kind of help. That is actually pretty popular.
Why do you think the Republicans don't have to play by those same rules? Like, if you're pro-Palestine, they're very happy going, you're a terrorist sympathizer. If you want certain economics, you're a Marxist and a communist. They name call constantly. They do the same thing that you're saying.
They do.
So why? Well, they don't seem to ever have like.
If they really wanted to seriously dominate the country in a way that's different than taking advantage of the fact people hated the Biden-Harris administration, they would have to like push back on stuff like that. They would have to move to the center themselves. That's the whole thing about the political era we're in. We're in an era where both Democrats and Republicans seem incapable, maybe even not interested in forming a dominant majority coalition and sort of sanding off their rough edges, correcting the things that need to be corrected, and really capturing the center of American politics in a decisive way. And absolutely the Republicans have the same problems. But they say and do a lot of stupid stuff that puts a ceiling on their support.
Generally, the biggest movements in America that have done what you're saying weren't centrist. The New Deal and FDR was considered far left. Reagan and the Reagan Revolution was considered far right. And it seems like the centrists, Romney, McCain, those guys got their asses kicked. So
well, the New Deal was actually quite centrist. I mean, it's
the New Deal was centrist?
Yeah, I mean,
it was basically Norman Thomas and socialism.
No, it was basically the institution of Keynesian economics in the country. And it was actually wildly popular at the time. I mean, people revered FDR. They thought he stood up for the common man and woman. Well, okay, but they still liked it.
But it wasn't
centrist. Still the center.
No, it wasn't the center.
I'm not defining the center as being a particular ideology. I'm defining it as what do people in the center of the distribution want? What do they care about? What are their concerns?
You mean like,
that's
so
centrist.
You're talking about statistical.
Yeah, that's my thing. Sorry. Guilty as charged.
I didn't know statisticians were such argumentative sons of bitches.
Well, you're pretty argumentative yourself. Anyway.
Can I tell you something?
Yeah.
Super argumentative. Like, I actually don't like that about myself. I'm very contrarian, too.
Yeah.
Like, and can get a little sanctimonious. Yeah, I don't know what I'm going to do about that.
Yeah. Well,
I have a feeling as I get older, it's not going to get any better.
Trust me on this.
No, I'm going to be one of those dudes where people are just like, don't invite him.
Right.
You guys can check out Ruy's work, liberalpatriot.com. Ruy Teixeira.